Hola, sweet friends. Welcome to Love Lab MD, the only place for highly ambitious women to be our authentic feminine selves while discussing intimate relationship topics. Love Lab MD is a non-judgmental space to seek and give relationship advice and power couple tips. We will learn how to authentically lead with love so that we can deepen the connection and enhance the intimacy between our love and ourselves. And I am your host, a doctor mom in a dual physician relationship and a marriage and intimacy coach, Dr. Kate Mangona. Bienvenidos. Hello, sweet friends, and welcome to another episode. Today, I have a special treat for you in store. We are going to be talking with Dr. Manish Desai. Dr. Manish Desai graduated from Texas A&M undergrad in biomedical engineering and did medical school there as well. He is trained in pediatrics and critical care. He's worked for 12 years as a pediatric critical care physician and now the medical director for the past 6 years. He is the loving husband to his sweet wife, who you will also hear from on another episode, Seema, and the loving father of 2 children, a 12-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. So welcome. Thanks so much for coming, Manish. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's, we only met, in February, I guess, at the conference. And, it's, I've only been on one other podcast and it was actually my wife's podcast. So, and that was actually just audio. So this is new. So, well,
I'm so happy to, you know what? And honestly, my podcast is for the typical overambitious, high-achieving professional physician, and I don't have to have somebody who's been on 12 or 20 podcasts or has a million side gigs or is a millionaire in the real estate world. I just want people to talk about what's real, like real life. What is your, we're going to be talking about how you fell in love. We're going to be talking about the struggles you've gone through in your marriage, what it's been like for you as a father, how you've grown through being a father and then husband, then father, then husband again. And so people just need to relate to people like you and me. So where do you want to start? Did I leave anything out of your intro? Like, who else are you besides a pediatric critical care physician and a husband and a father?
I think that's most of it. I've created a job situation where I have a lot of free time. So I started cooking a lot more and different things like that. And I play golf and I do yoga and I do all the other stuff that I want to do during my free time that I actually have a lot of it these days, it feels like. But,
wow. Okay. We're definitely going to be talking about this free time a little bit later. After we talk about how you fell in love in a little bit. We're going to circle back to this because I think a lot of physicians would love to know how we can say I have a lot of free time because I'm married to one of them and I am one of them. Okay. So take us back. When did you guys meet? How'd you fall in love?
We actually met when I was in medical school. I was a second year med student, I think, and I was supposed to be, we had rounds of tests like every 2 weeks, and it was like all the subjects, everything, and it was like a Saturday night, and my friends were annoying me about going out, and I was like, yeah, I really have to study, and I was like, fine, I'll consider joining y'all later on, like. And so I didn't go out till like 10:30 or something at night, at least. No, it was later than that, probably 10:30 or 11. And I went to a bar with one of my friends, one of my best friends, and we just hung out for a little while. And I was like, is anybody else even coming here? Whatever else. Apparently there was some other sort of event going on in town, and a handful of people had been there. And then they said, oh, there's so-and-so and so-and-so's coming from there. I was like, okay, so it's more same people we hung out with enough. So it was nothing exciting. I was like, I'll have a drink or two and then head back home after a while. It's fine. But the next thing you know, one of the people I knew was coming, walked in, and Seema walked in with her, and kind of out of the blue, just I went and gave the person I knew a hug when I met her, and then I actually gave Seema a hug too. And it was weird because I don't even know like why I would do that with somebody I've never met before, but I did. And honestly, we hung out there for a while at the bar, and then everybody ended up back at somebody else's apartment, and we talked and hung out for several hours that night. And like, that was it. It really wasn't, it was a lot longer night than it was supposed to be for me. By the time I went home at like 2 or 3 in the morning, I went home I was talking to my friend, and I was like, man, I think I could marry this girl.
What? Oh my gosh. Okay, so what did you talk about?
Like, just, I don't, it was weird because we are, um, being Indian, there's a lot of people who have these arranged marriages and things like that. And they talk about, like, what have you done? What are your, basically it's called like a bio data or something. What's all your, what have you done in the past, and what are you interested in? How do you feel about certain things, whatever it may be. And we just ended up talking about a lot of that kind of stuff. It was just like clearing the deck as far as like, what, are there any red flags with this person, or do I, compatibility, that kind of stuff. It's probably the same stuff people put on dating websites and stuff and we just kind of went through all that stuff, and she's just like checking all the boxes.
Oh, so your bio data stuff. Okay, so it was like
I mean, it wasn't just that, but that was like just on top of the fact that we seem physically attracted to each other. And then we actually are both Gujarati, which is a smaller subset in Gujarat and in India. So we grew up speaking the same language as well, which there's lots of languages, so it's not that common, I guess. It's common enough, but, those things are not random, I guess, to us.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, I mean it was meant to be. Okay, so came from the same, okay, Gujarati. What else? What else was there? I mean, you guys were both kind of training to be professionals, right?
Yeah, she was training. She was actually applying for dental school, I think, at that time when she
Okay.
met me, because the friend we had in common at that time, she was actually going to dental school, and that's why she came to visit, and they met and
Okay.
stuff like that. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just family centered and different things like that. I don't even know offhand. It's like simple things like you don't smoke, you don't, whatever. I don't know. It was just. Yeah, it wasn't that much. Most of it was about just kind of what do you want to do? What are you interested in? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did tell her I was interested in surgery at the time. And she didn't love that because she thought it was too time consuming and stuff like that. But I was actually in charge of the surgery interest group in medical school for the first couple years.
Wow.
And yeah, and then after we were dating for a while, we went through third year, and we could go through all the rotations, all that. And she would visit me in Temple because it's a small town, and that's where I trained. But she said, the weeks you were on pediatrics, you were actually like super happy. The weeks you were on surgery, you were just grumpy and not, worth being around. It was really challenging to even be around you, and you were tired, and it just was a different person. I was like, I can see that that's possible. And I enjoyed peds. And I think, I probably partied a little too much in medical school, to
Mhm.
be perfectly honest. So my grades didn't end up being good enough where I really was like competitive for surgery anyway. It just kind of, the setup was weird because a lot of my friends were a year or two younger than me at A&M. And so then when I graduated college, I was still in college with my friends. I still lived with them. I still had 3 roommates in medical school that were in college at the time, and all
Wow.
that kind of stuff. So I was going out and stuff like that all the time. And so I really probably didn't, hit I wouldn't have had my choice of places for surgery if I did that ultimately anyway. And it kind of worked out that I ended up wanting to do pediatrics, and followed her to San Antonio basically because she started dental school there a year before I went into residency.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and like the person who you were on your rotation says a lot too. Like
Yeah.
who I want to be.
But you don't see that yourself. She saw it. And I thinking about it and really taking it in, it's like, yeah, if you're gonna, are you happy doing this? And it's like, that was the first, time that ever happened to me. But now it's like, we see that all the time, right? And when she's a coach, and when you're around other people who do that kind of stuff, and, you're trying to live your life in a way where you're happier, then you can make choices that actually, fill that need. And that was the first choice I made. That was obviously a big choice that was done mainly because it seemed like I'd be happier doing that. Now I still like procedures and all that kind of stuff, and that's what I ultimately ended up in, right? If I did general peds, I never wanted to be in a clinic anyway. That was not my goal. But I mean, surgeons still have clinic. I actually have zero clinics. So I ended up in a better spot for me anyway now. It's all hospital work. So
yes. Yeah. I mean, and there was the chemistry there too, as you said, right? So all of that, the biodata, it can't just be the biodata. There's the chemistry that's real.
Yeah, but she would have been somebody that if I saw in a dating profile, things would have matched up, I guess. And so the fact that we actually had the spark in person and then all those things matched up, it just is, yeah, that's kind of how it went.
Got it. Okay. So I know you have a couple stories you want to share about residency and how how they highlighted how to do things the right way. Intriguing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so as an intern, I was on a hemonc, it was just an overnight call and it was a hemonc floor that had a kid with sickle cell disease that was in with a pain crisis, and he was in excruciating pain, and he was actually really, really tolerant to meds and stuff like that. So he was getting like, I don't know, 20 milligrams of morphine at a time, and it was still not touching him and things like that. But we would have these resident conferences in the morning post call, and it was the intern and upper level, and the intern would always have to present a case from the night before or discuss something like that. And I was at this kid's bedside, and my upper level was like, hey, we need to go for the conference so you can present this thing. And I really was not in, I was just doing what I was told because I was the, intern, and I didn't feel good about it, but I walked away from that and went to the conference, did what I was supposed to do. By the time I came back, this kid was even in worse pain, and everything was just magnified even more. And I actually got written up for it through my program and stuff like that. Like, this is, you can't abandon a patient in the moment or whatever else. And it was kind of it wasn't in the moment, I thought it wasn't my decision. But I owned it afterwards because it was like, I still could have stayed and whatever else. You just feel like when you're starting out, you're supposed to do what everybody else tells you to do. And but to me, that was this other person not practicing the right way, and just it didn't end up being the right thing for that kid. I mean, he was fine afterwards, but like it just wasn't a delay in care in that situation is not what you want. And so when I think about when I teach residents and everything else like that, there's so many other things we can get tracked into or caught up in, but the patient care has to come first, and how you do it has to come first. Things of that nature. And so the politics of how everything else works really doesn't have a place for me anymore. And that was one story where I was, it hit me hard, and it stuck with me for a while. So like the following year, I was a second year, and we had, I was rounding on a kid that was like in a intermediate level unit. That looked really rough. And my attending was rounding like table rounds upstairs on another floor. And the attending was with the third year, and they were calling me to come round up there. And I said, no, I'm not going to. I am busy here. You can come down here if you want to talk, but this kid's not doing well. And sorry, I can't come up there. And then I worked on the kid for a little bit. And then ultimately I was like, this kid's not going to get, they're not getting better. I walked over to the ICU, which happened to be on the same floor as a step down, walked in and started talking to whoever would listen that, hey, I've got this kid, this is what's going on. And one of the third years stepped up to me immediately and was like, you can't talk to us. You can't talk to us about a patient. You need to call your upper level. You need to call your attending. They can come talk to us about it. And I just said, well, I told them what they needed to know anyway. And then I went back to the patient. I was like, look, this kid needs to be here. This is just what's going on. I can have them call you if that makes you feel better. But I went back to the patient. The attending that was there, there was actually an ICU attending that was within earshot, listening to what I was saying. But he didn't really say anything to the resident in the moment. He just, but when I went back to take care of the patient, I was, back working on him. And then the transport team actually came over to the room where I was in and started helping me and started working on the patient. And they said that, the attending had sent him over there. And it was like, okay, well, at least somebody was paying attention. And then the kid ultimately went to the ICU anyway. But that was one of, it's like, I did all the things that everybody's telling me not to do, but I did it for the right reason. And the end point is what I wanted from it because of it. So how you practice in many ways, like I could have stopped 3 times for various reasons from doing what I needed to for that one child, but I wasn't going to, because that other situation was in my head. And I was just like, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the lessons here for those who are listening and, whether you're a trainee or an attending, right? Because sometimes you always have somebody senior to you, is it, what would you say it is? So like follow your gut, follow your intuition. Don't just follow the rule books because we're told what to do. Like when a kid needs your help, you've got to fight, you've got to advocate.
Yeah, I think it's instinct. And then if you get in trouble, if you can justify what you did for the right reasons, then you can get in trouble and you'll be able to clean it up afterwards. That's fine. It's not a big deal. If somebody wants to pitch a fit about what you did or didn't do in the moment, your justifications, if they're valuable enough to you, then they will clean up the rest of it afterwards. If somebody really wanted to get into it with me about why I didn't leave that kid's bedside, they don't have enough to stand on. Whereas the other instance, like they certainly had lots to stand on, and I was the one who ended up eating it a little bit afterwards, right? Because it wasn't a situation that I should have let myself be in, even if I was just following the rules. And it turned out the attending that was in the ICU that day, I graduated residency there. I trained as a fellow, critical care fellow in that ICU. And this was my program director ultimately. And I have a lot of respect for him. But that was the first time I saw it. It was just like, he knew what I was saying, and he was quiet in terms of how he led, but like he didn't overstep the other resident at the time. He just found a way to make sure that I got help. Yeah. So I really appreciated that in the moment too.
And took care of the patient. I mean, this is such an important conversation because there's such a hierarchy in medicine. I know other careers, there are too, corporate America, but there's such a hierarchy, and we're taught, to just kind of do the scut work or be under the radar, or do what people are said. And when we actually, and bad outcomes can come from that. If we're just like doing things to people please, or doing things because we want to, we feel like this might be the path to getting honors in our rotation. The patient always comes first. I mean, we're going to have to live with that the rest of our life, whatever happens, what we decide. So,
yeah.
And when you were saying earlier about, it wasn't when you were going to the conference and it really wasn't my decision, but you owned it up later. A lot of people, and this relates to marriage too, like parenting, marriage, we tend to say, like, and a lot of people who go to medical school, even, it wasn't my decision, right? It was my parents' decision. My parents made me go. And ultimately, who's the one who like goes through the motions for these things?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so let's talk about you and Seema then. So it sounds like she helped you a little bit, like you talked it out, surgery versus pediatrics, and then where you guys went after that, San Antonio. When did you guys get married and have kids?
Well, her parents are fairly traditional, and mine mostly too, but basically they have this mindset that we all have to be making our own money, and we have to be finished with school and finished with the educational component and all that. So we didn't actually get married until after she was finished with dental school. And
Okay.
that was when I finished residency. That's when we actually got married. I think I proposed second year residency and then we got married after that. Like the idea of like you live on loans and all this other stuff, that wasn't something they really subscribed to. Like one of you need to be having a real job or about to have a real job if you want to get married.
Okay.
That's kind of how they looked at it.
Okay.
So like she
Okay.
needed to finish her school. And I was like, that's fine. Uh,
So you guys had kids, then once you became, you were both like graduated from your programs?
yeah, because I was a fellow in San Antonio for 3 years while she was working in dentistry doing private practice, kind of
Okay.
just associate work at a few different places. And then after second year, third year, I guess toward the end of my fellowship, I knew I was going back to Temple to be an attending. And she knew she was going to let go of whatever job she had there. So she kind of had already gone a little bit part-time at that
Okay.
point. But then we were expecting by the time we moved here.
And when did the first challenge come in your marriage? Like what was the first thing you guys had to grow like from together? Was it before or after kids?
I think it was probably after, because I think before kids, we fought a lot. We did argue a lot. And I think we got better over, I don't know, it took us we just fought a lot the first couple of years. There was a lot of arguments and not really like, it was a lot of communication gaps that we had from like, she would have thoughts that she just wouldn't tell me and let it build up and stuff like that. And then eventually tell me. And it's like, you just exploded on me all this stuff. And why is it so hard to like, how come you didn't say anything, last week or the week before or whatever else? And I think it was, I don't know how much of it was just growing up in her family. For her, like she, was quiet, held her tongue more about different things. My family's super vocal and just like says what's on their mind all the time, and it's loud and all of that. At my house, it's always been that way.
Okay.
Whereas at her house, it was different. And so I think a lot of that was just the mesh of how we conveyed our opinions. It probably took us a year or two after we got married. And that was like, but after that, it was better. I think it was
How
just
did you
more
get through that? Like how
it
did
was,
you learn together?
it was mostly just like, hey, I just need to know what you're actually thinking because I don't understand like enough you're going to lose me if you tell me that I'm supposed to get everything by the body language or by the tone or by the this or by the that. Just tell me. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what you're thinking, and keep me posted to where it's not something that boils over after a while. Because she realized, there were examples within there where you could be like, this would not have been a big deal had I known, a month ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, this sounds very familiar. Okay. Very familiar, which is why I'm laughing. How did she respond quickly to that? Like when you said, I need to know what you're actually thinking, was she able to like the next day all of a sudden tell you all of the things she was thinking in her head? Or how did that work?
Uh, I don't know. It's been a long time.
I'm gonna have to ask her. I'm gonna have
She
to ask her.
and that's just like one thing with her, during that time. I think the biggest challenge she's had with me, and that's still a challenge probably, but not as bad as it used to be, is I used to just cut her off all the time when she started talking. I would just start talking while she's still talking. But in our house, again, we grew up in a house where basically if you don't say what you want to say when you want to say it, you won't get a chance to speak. So that's just, we're loud, and that's how it's always been. And she wasn't like that. So I had to kind of improve in terms of not cutting her off consistently and listening to what she's saying first before I speak and all that kind of stuff. Like I was still talking remark from her has probably been spoken to me. It's probably in the thousands of times by now.
Okay.
It's, back then it was probably at least 100 times a year. Now it's probably at least, I don't know, a few times a month or a week at least. It was a ton more before.
Okay. So
it still happens, but it's not as bad.
You sounds like you really worked on it together and you kind of grew together in the communication intelligence department.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just she helped me realize that it was just not respecting her opinion, or that's how it came off, even though that wasn't my intention. So a lot of my mannerisms and stuff are not that, it's not, once you get down to the fact that none of it's rooted in ill intention. It's just the way what you're used to and what's habitual for you, then you can work on it.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. So that was, you said you worked on that before kids. And then talk a little bit about after kids, what things changed for you, how you kept, how you kept the spark alive, even when you had young kids. And I know you still have, even you have a 12 and a 9-year-old now, and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, after we had kids, it was more challenging because even though I was getting out of fellowship and working as an attending, that's usually supposed to be less work, less hours in general. I don't think that it was necessarily much less hours for me. It was an easier job because I had residents under me and stuff like that. But I was doing really long shifts. My first when I first started, there was only 4 of us doing the exact same job that I do right now with 7 people.
Okay.
And so the exact same hours we covered and all of that. And so, I mean, I was working 50, 60 hours a week back then in the hospital. And some of the weeks were more than that, like 120 hours as an attending. That's literally, it's a little bit crazy. I mean, my first service weeks back then would be like, I'd be on 24 on Saturday, and then I'd be on Monday, Tuesday, and 24 on Tuesday, and stay and round on Wednesday and not go home until like the end of the day Wednesday, and then go back Thursday, Friday, 24 on Friday, off Saturday, 24 on Sunday. That would be like an actual once every 4 weeks I did that schedule. So the workload and the work wasn't as hard because we weren't a busy children's hospital. So it was like I was free up there. I had a lot of time. I actually studied for boards without ever picking up a book at home. I did all of my studying at work, and I did, other stuff there, but it was different because we had a toddler, a baby at that time. And so, it just left Seema isolated, I think, more with taking care of him and stuff like that. It was a lot of hours I was gone. And that did create some guilt for me as far as just being gone all the time.
Yeah.
And she ended up with our first child. She had postpartum depression, which I honestly did not even, I wasn't even aware of until later. Like it really wasn't something that, and maybe she was partly aware of it herself, and it just didn't, she would say things here and there, and that this is just really hard, or this is just really exhausting, or whatever else it may be. But it was just, for me, I was still gone a lot, working a lot. I'd help when I was home, but you can only do so much if you're not home hardly any of the time. And we had just moved to Austin at that time, so we didn't really have much of a friend circle, much of a, social network outside of that. So it was pretty lonely for her, I think. And so that entire period of time when my son was really young was a challenge. And I think once she got past all of that, and that's her story more than mine, but that was a lot more of like yoga and other things like that she got into. And but a lot of the stuff she got into after that is the stuff we do together now. Like we practice yoga now, we work out together, we go on walks together, we do all of the wellness kind of components of my life right now. I pretty much do all of them with her right now, other than like when I go play basketball or pickleball or whatever with my friends or with other people.
Oh,
she doesn't play golf with me either. So yeah, I play golf by myself too.
okay.
Other people.
Yeah.
But
you do a
but
lot.
the other, well, because we actually we never really joined a gym. We always worked out at home. We do yoga at home. We do all that kind of stuff at home. And so we've just done those kinds of things together. And so that's always kept us connected when the kids are, and then my schedule is flexible and has all this variability to where like I didn't have anything else to do today before I got on with you. I mean, I got up with the kids.
This is what I want to talk about, Manish, next. It's like, okay, how do we create this schedule, right? Because it sounds like you've decided, you went from like what, 3 24-hour shifts in 1 week, plus like still working the days in between, to I have free time. I can do yoga with my wife in the morning if I want to. What happened?
So, I mean, we got a lot busier at work over the last, the children's hospital has grown a ton. We've gotten a lot more volume, and we've had, it's just a lot more volume, a lot more acuity. So I'm much more busy when I go to work now than I used to be back then. But in the process of doing so, that means we've generated enough to where we have more people there, right? And so when you think about all these RVU based models and stuff like that, everybody's like, well, if I was 4 people and then we're doing the amount of work we're doing now, I'd be making, 3 times the money. Instead, we just kept hiring more people and kept the work split out further and further. Like I have 7 people in my group now. I run the division. I've run it for 5 years now. If I had the opportunity to add the 7th person in 22, I could have kept 6 and we would all just make more money. But I said, no, I'm going to take the 7th person. We'll just all take whatever we produce and do whatever we get from it. It's a lot of the salary structure is still a lot of salary, so it's still comfortable anyway. But the bonus structure is different, right? So, but choosing the lifestyle over the extra money in that sense, that's something I think a lot of people have that option in their respective fields and stuff to choose to have more partners or choose to have more coverage for your call or more, a different schedule, take a day out of clinic every week or whatever else it may be. I think a lot of people can do that and create more time for themselves if they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of money in the process. So I think that's one part of it. And then being the director, I make the schedule myself. And so I don't actually have any administrative support at work. All my calendar stuff is in a calendar with Seema. And so it's a family calendar. And so I just put my call schedule in there and all that kind of stuff. So, but then I make the schedule in a way that is surrounded by all my kids' stuff and all my wife's stuff and whatever we're trying to do as a family. And, and I think that it is when you have any administrative component, it's harder. But when I took on the administrative component, it was 2019, and my kids were finally old enough that they were both out of the house. And so before that, I actually refused to do the admin component or be director of my group because it meant some meetings and stuff like that while I still had toddlers around in the house. I was like, I'm not going to work on a day when I'm not clinically scheduled to be there if I've got a 2-year-old at my house because they were home at that time. So once they were both stable in school, I said, yeah, I think I can do that because I would rather take over the group than have somebody from outside come in and disturb this chemistry that we have as far as a working group, and so 2019 to 2020, and then 2020, the pandemic, everything turned virtual. And I think some people want to go back to in-person meetings and stuff, but I'm not doing it. I just do everything from home. All my administrative component is at home. So if anybody wants to do anything else with me, I just do it over Teams. I even interview prospective faculty over the computer, like what I'm doing with you, unless I happen to already be at work. I basically schedule all of my other extra meetings that people want me to do in person around my work schedule that I'm already driving up there to be up there for a while or something like that. So it creates a lot more flexibility in what I do. Granted, it's shift work. And so you do work nights, you work weekends, you have all of that kind of stuff as part of the deal. So I don't have the schedule everybody has, but I can still, for the most part, be home enough days to where I can work out 3 days. I mean, I work out with her 3 days a week right now. She's on this sort of plan that she's been working with somebody on. And so I do the same workouts with her. And it's been since the beginning of January, and I haven't missed a workout because I've been home enough to do it.
So how many days do you actually go in to do like a shift?
Now I only go in for the attending week, like Monday through Friday. I only go in once every 7 weeks to do that. Otherwise, I go in for a handful of call nights in a month, like 5 or 6 max.
Oh, okay. So you guys.
And I go in for a handful of days where we provide sedation too for like MRIs and leukemia kids getting spinal taps and bone marrows and all that kind of stuff. So the sedation schedule is, again, what I create it to be. And I've had them narrow it down to just like, it's from like 9 to 2 on Monday through Friday is the only time we are supposed to be doing those cases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And because I want a little more time in the morning in case somebody up there in the ICUs attending needs extra help. So I protect that time, and then I protect mid-afternoon so that they can help clean up whatever's going on in the ICU so that person can leave for the day if they're struggling to get through rounds or struggling to get through the day. So all of these like small micro choices to make the job easier that way. And we used to do, I mean, even when we had 6 or 7 people, we were still doing a few 24-hour shifts, but I've taken that away. We just do max 16-hour shifts. And our attending weeks used to be 7 days. Now they're down to 5. So I'm just kind of balancing the work out as much as I can. It is less long stretches of time off, but it's still enough. And it's still, your pace. I've created a situation where we can all pace ourselves better and not get burnt out doing what we're doing because it's hard work.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, that's beautiful. Tell us about the helicopter transport.
So that was interesting because it was during this phase when we had both kids at that time, but Monsi was younger. And so both kids were a fair amount of work. And I was still, Seema was still like many times waiting for me to get home, like to help, right, to do stuff. And I felt that, I knew that. And I was upstairs in the ICU. I had actually signed out with my oncoming attending. This was one of my service weeks where I'm Monday through Thursday or whatever, at least by then, leaving home at 6 or 7 and coming back at 6 or so in the evening. So longer days, because I drive about an hour each way anyway. But when I was getting off my shift, I went down to the ER because they had called about a patient. We were like, myself, I'm there. My partner who was taking over for me was there, and they've got an ER attending there. And there was a single ER attending covering the ER for the rest of the evening. And we get this one kid that has myocarditis and it was started having dysrhythmias and basically is just not stable. And the heart function was really poor. We had an ECMO program at that time, but we don't have cardiac surgery. And so to put a cardiac patient like that on ECMO for a bad heart, you're risking that then you're going to have to transport them again. And those are not the kind of kids we would want to put on ECMO at our facility. And so it was kind of like, I'm looking around and I'm like, this kid needs to get somewhere. We called Houston. We called Texas Children's. They said, we can come and get the kid, but everything you're describing is saying that you don't have that kind of time for us to come get the kid. It's going to be better if you just bring the kid here immediately. And I'm looking around in the room and I'm like, part of me is like, I need to get home because all this, the mentality of I need to go back home and help because I've been gone all day or whatever else. And the other part of me, the part of me that's, that same resident mindset of I'm trying to help, I need to help this kid, is looking around the room and thinking the only other person here who could potentially go with this kid is either me or one of these ER residents who, because that's the only other physician in the room. The ER attending needed to run the ER and my partner needed to be upstairs for the ICU. So I was like, yeah, I'll go. I mean, I guess I don't really have, to me, it wasn't a choice at that point, but I had to call Seema and she was actually disappointed and, frustrated about it, obviously in the moment about, as far as not being able to go, but she didn't, you can't convey the severity of a situation in that amount of time. Right. And so I got on the helicopter with this kid. We got to Houston. We got the kid into the ICU in Houston, but like the kid was really unstable and actually went to the operating room immediately, got put on ECMO immediately, and survived actually and did well. But that's and in retrospect, like if I had to do something like that now, Seema she wouldn't even blink. She'd just be like, yeah, of course, you need to go do that.
Yeah.
So, but it's the struggle with the small kids and the time and all this other stuff and where you prioritize things.
Right. What do you think is the difference though between like then and now? Like
I think it was a lot of work for her on herself. Like it was all of the work to overcome the postpartum depression, which it took her a whole long time to actually change how she did things, as far as managing that kind of stuff, I think, just with the kids and all of that as well. And then this was actually before she became a coach. So some of this is just different now because of that. I think she's got a different mindset about how she approaches things, and what, our values are and what we find important and things of
Yeah.
that nature. Like right now, if I go take call, like both my kids don't mind either. They get it now.
Yeah.
They're 9 and 12, but they don't ever really, once in a while when they don't realize I was supposed to be on call, it's like, oh, you're not coming home today. But otherwise it's like, my daughter, she gets home at 3 and I leave, like I'm going to take call today. I leave right at around 3 and I try to wait till she's walked home so I can give her a hug goodbye and then I leave.
Mhm.
And she's not, when she doesn't know that I'm on call, then it bothers her a little bit, but they're great about it too. They understand the value of what I'm doing there differently than what they did before, right? Um, and I think she does too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like you're doing it every single day, right? I mean, you said
Right.
you have 7 people, so you each take, when this happened, how many people did your group have?
Probably 5 or so. So
Okay.
we were still pretty busy in terms of the number of hours we were putting in and stuff like that. We weren't quite to, but we were getting busier as far as the hospital. The work was harder, but we didn't. It was at most 5 or 6 people, but it was still, the kids were still little. That was most of it. The kids were involved, and it's just a lot more effort here at home in that time frame. And it's nothing more than the expectation. If she knew what time I was coming home,
Yes.
she was expecting me home, and then it didn't work out. That's where you kind of have this expectation that you're supposed to be here by now, and it's already been a long week. Every service week I do, she takes over everything at home. Like whether it's the cooking or whether it's the cleaning up after the kids or doing all their stuff. Every service week, she's almost a single parent.
Hmm.
Even now, like it's not. I don't do as much when I'm attending for those weeks, but it's 1 out of 7 now, and it's not that bad.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I 100% get this, Manish. So when Victor and I first had kids 6.5 years ago, we were both full time. And I think I had that same thing. Like I expected him, right, to be home at a certain time. I don't know why. I can't even remember why, because he works. I'm more shift work, where as a pediatric radiologist, get off at 4:30. I can go home as long as my lists are clean. But somebody else can come take care of those lists. It's got to like contour, make sure he sees all his consults. The machine's on until 10 p.m. sometimes. So one of the doctors has got to be late every night. And with the stress of little kids, it's so, and like being a new mom, it's like you just really want help. It's like you want this. It might not always be just the physical help, but you need like the mental help too, for somebody else to relieve that pressure from you. And that arguing with reality that he's not going to be home at 6 p.m. every night, but still expecting it. And that's when like you leads you to disappointment, right? It's like when your expectations don't work out, you're going to be disappointed. So, Tony Robbins says this thing: trade expectations for appreciation, and your life will never be the same. And it took me a while. And to me, this whole story and this whole scene, you're painting the picture about her, becoming more cognizant of her wellness and becoming a coach and learning these mindset techniques. I had to do the same thing. And, don't get me wrong, it's still a struggle some days and harder some days than others. But instead of focusing on what I expect my husband to do and what I expect him to say, like every day, instead of focusing on like how thankful I am for our situation, for the littlest things he does, it makes a huge difference in my life and in his and in my
yeah,
children.
yeah. I mean, it's a different approach when now she looks at it more from the gratitude of like, it's not our kids in the ICU, and you're there to help them go. You're able to help them, so help them.
Yes. it's not our kids in the ICU. It could be. It could
Yeah.
be. And it's not. And that's why we went into this field, right? We went into this line of work because we love helping people, and it brings us joy to see people get better, or to be part of their journey, even if they don't, to just have the honor of being part of their journey. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. And then you kind of mentioned how that kind of reframed some of your guilt of not being home enough. Right? You had said like this whole helicopter trip and him survive. Was it the child who survived? Right? Was it that because he got better, you knew you make the right choice? Is that what kind of
I mean, I think I knew I made the right choice anyway. It wasn't really a choice in the moment. It was really just conveying it to her. The weirdest part there was the only challenging aspect of that decision was calling her to tell her, I don't know when I'll be home.
Yeah.
Like I'm leaving here at 7 in a helicopter to go to Houston or to get this child settled out over there. Then I'm gonna, have to get a ride back in the helicopter from there, and then eventually drive home. And then I got to turn around and go back to work in the morning. So
Yeah.
like I don't think I got home till midnight or something, or 1 a.m, and then I turned around and went back to work at 7. So it's just those kinds of situations obviously that's a one-off it's the only time I've been in a helicopter for work. But we have plenty of times where there's, the work is just too hard or too busy for one person to take over and the second person needs to stay longer. Anytime I had to do that in the past, earlier in my career, was more challenging for her. It's like, why do you have to stick around longer? And it's just like, it's too overwhelming for whoever just came on. Like I can't do anything different. Now it's just part of, the service mindset of what we do, and what the gratitude that she makes sure that's a part of our house for the kids too. Like, to where we just practice that as much as we can, to where we really don't feel this negativity when this kind of stuff happens. So the kids get it when I have to stay late. They don't really it doesn't faze them anymore. I may miss some of their stuff once in a while, but a lot of stuff I schedule around anyway.
So what advice would you have for people who are listening who may still be struggling with feeling like their spouse could, right? They could do what you were saying earlier. They could cut down shifts, cut down hire somebody else, but they're not, right? Maybe they're married to the money. Maybe they're married to the just the idea of being that full-time physician, or that they love being needed, helping. Like, what would you say to people listening who may be that spouse, or be the spouse of that person?
It's tough to know what the right decision is for you. I mean, Seema also stopped practicing dentistry when each kid was born, and she stopped for a while. And then when she went back, when the kids were 18 months or whatever time they could go to Montessori, she was only going part-time in between each time. And it wasn't a career she loved. And that's why she's not doing it anymore. Whereas other people, if you have two people working full-time in a career they actually want to be in, and you're trying to make this thing work with kids and stuff, then I can see the perspective of, like, hiring somebody to help with the kids, or help with some of the stuff around the house, or things you can delegate, whatever. That perspective is there, I think, for a lot of people. We've never actually, I think we only had a nanny for a few months at one point in time when my son was, 15 months and waiting to be 18 months to go to Montessori. And we were both working mostly full time at that time. It was like 3 days a week for her, but those are the days we had a nanny. And it was weird. I didn't like it. I mean, I would come home and I'd be home and I can't get any sleep or do anything else when my kid knows I'm home and he's with the nanny, and he just would be like, he'd be upset because I'm not hanging out with him and doing stuff with him. But it's a weird dynamic to try to figure out how to do that for us. And it just never really worked. And so we've really never had nanny, sitter, any of that kind of stuff since then, hardly. We have, uniquely, we have a lot of time to ourselves. And, when you talk about, like, how do you keep things alive with the kids in play. We went on lots of dates during the day for many years. That's what we pretty much do is we'll go out to the mall or go eat lunch or whatever else when both of us happen to be home and the kids are both at school. So we have time with each other a lot of times when kids are gone. I think the busier different things get with her work stuff and different things, it fluctuates how much we have time with each other, but we still carve out some time. Lately, for the last 3 months, 4 months, we've just pretty much go on a walk almost every day and for like up to an hour, as long as the weather's good. And other than that, we pretty much, so there's certain things that we've just added into our day to where we have time for each other. And so we don't really do date night per se, and we just end up spending that time with the kids. And that works for us. It doesn't, I think you have to figure out where your values are and your priorities are, and then craft the things and, shift things around to make it work for that.
No, I love this perspective.
And that's the same thing with work too. I mean, I think if you go back to like really why you chose to do the job and you actually, the joy you actually have of helping and the gratitude you get for being able to be in that position of service, it's your why, right? It's basically, why are you doing this? Why are you in medicine? If you can, the more you can stay in touch with that while you're working, the idea of burnout has never even come across my radar for me. Like I could work for another 30 years. I'd be happy. I really don't need to stop. And I don't feel like, I think when I get tired of driving back and forth from work, maybe when I get tired of the 16-hour overnight shifts, if I'm just, older, but that's just a mentality, right? Am I really older? No. I mean, if I work out and I, do yoga and I exercise and I go for my walks and all this other stuff, then I feel like I should be able to keep that up for the next 20 years too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing this insight. I love it because it's very different than how Victor and I do things, and people need to hear lots of perspectives, right? Because we're all different people. We have different wants and desires, and why be stuck in a job if you're not happy? I can't wait to have a conversation with Seema next about her journey. And anything else you want to leave the audience with before we say goodbye?
I can't think of anything offhand. I'm sure she'll have lots more to add, and how much of what I said might get, said differently by her.
Yes, we will see if your story is accurate for sure. Okay, thank you so much, Manish.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
I will see you later. Bye. Bye-bye. What an amazing interview with Dr. Manish Desai. I loved it. And I love how he shared such a different perspective than you would have just gotten from me or Victor. I mean, the way they just planned out their family and their work schedule and Seema's schedule, who we'll hear from later, was beautiful. So I want to give you my 3 big take-home points. Number 1, notice when you are happy. Notice which activities, in which settings, in which environments, around which people you are happy. Sometimes you cannot actually identify this yourself, and you need a third party or an objective person outside to tell you, like Seema told Manish, hey, when you're on surgery, you're really hard to be around. You're difficult. When you're in pediatrics, you're really happy. He had no idea. He said he had no idea. She had to tell him. I guarantee you, there are some things in your life you have no idea. And I can tell you, I'll tell you right now, you come to my house during a morning when I'm trying to get 3 kids ready for school by myself, and we only have 30 minutes to eat, brush our teeth, get clothes on, get hair done, walk out, the shoes and socks on, and walk out the door. I'm going to be a lot less joyful and bubbly than another time in my life. But sometimes we don't always identify this ourselves, and we could use some outside eyeballs to reflect this back upon us. Number 2, are you maximizing the value of your time when you have off and your spouse is around? Now, we all say, we don't have enough time in the day. Besides Manish, who bluntly said that he has so much free time, which is amazing. So the time that you do have, and you and your spouse are in the house together, and the kids might be at school, are you maximizing that time? What are you choosing to do with that time? Are you running to go get your nails done? Are you grabbing lunch with a friend? Or are you spending it with your love, who you may not see in the evening time? And I'm not saying either of those are wrong. I mean, a girl loves to get her nails done, go eat lunch with her friend. Do you choose to do it in a time that is better for when you have a little bit more time on your hands, or if your spouse is working all the time? If your spouse is always home, if you guys are always home together, then I guess it doesn't really matter. But just ask yourself, like, do a little time audit, because you don't have to go on a traditional date night. You could do a coffee morning. You could do a lunch break. Figure out, and if you have each other's schedules, can you do them together? Can you calendar in such a way that you are at least maximizing that value of your time when you do have it with your spouse? Whether it's going over financials, doing your taxes, April's coming up, or just having a cuddle sesh. And number 3, have you ever considered making less money in order to have a better life? What would that look like for you? I love how Manish said there came an opportunity to hire more people, and he did it. And he's an RVU-based physician. So hiring more people means you make less money. But to him, wellness is important. Having extra time at home with his family, with his 2 children and his wife, and himself is important. And he would rather rearrange his life, realign money commitments, subscriptions, trips, so that he could work less and make a little bit less money. Micro choices can make your life so much more joyful. And that is it, my friend. Go and figure out these micro choices. Figure out the 1%, the 2% shifts you can make today to make tonight and tomorrow even more joyful. So much love, my friends. Now, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend. You are paying it forward. You are giving somebody else new information and new ideas of how to do things with little kids, with preteens. Consider, the job, headspace, mindspace. Share it. I would love it if you give us a 5-star review. If you think it's 5-star material, write us a review. Write us any review. Reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify's helps other people discover this podcast as well. Thank you so much, my friends. Have a happy rest of your week. So much love to you and your family.